In your bulletin today is something we haven't done for a while here. I think we've put in financial year-end reports before, but we went ahead and there is a report from myself, from the church board secretary, the church treasurer, the missions president, the NYI president, and then a combined report from Pastor Raphael and his wife Alice in respect to, it says International Ministry Report, which is true kind of, but that's really what their focus has been. They needed to give a report as those who have a local minister's license from this church. And you also see in there then as well one from Linda Pasquale. And I'm going to ask you not to read that, even mine, for now. I'm going to kind of parallel some of that. So if you turn and you open it to the very first page, there is a section there. We didn't put in your bulletin an extra sheet for notes, but there is like just an area for you to write some things down. Like I said, I'm going to parallel this, but I'm not going to go exactly through it, but touch on some of the things that are in that written report in this message today, which we have entitled Looking Back and Looking Ahead. I'd ask if there'd be somebody, actually a couple somebodies, maybe who would just stand where you are and pray for this time of the service today. Would you do that? Thank you, Elliot. One more person, before he starts this, one more person stand, and you can pick up as soon as, I'm pointing over here just for a balancing procedure, I guess. Is there someone over here who would just follow Elliot with a prayer? Okay, right here, that's good too. Go ahead, Elliot.
We thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for giving us this time to come into your sanctuary.
Yes.
To praise you with our voices.
Yes.
With our hearts and with our lives. We thank you for bringing us here safe in our heart's preparation for this sermon today.
Yes.
We pray that you put your healing hand upon Pastor Ed as he deals with these little tumors that he's been fighting with for a while. We pray that you'll put your hand on Rhonda as she is at home. And we pray for all the other members of this congregation that are dealing with physical, spiritual, and financial issues.
Yes.
Lord, we thank you for never giving up on us.
Amen.
Never failing us. Always there for us. And I pray this in the holy name of Jesus. Amen.
Eternal ever loving one, we surrender to you today. We surrender our fear.
Yes.
We surrender our pains.
Yes.
We surrender our all to you. It's only in you are we complete and whole and love and eternal.
Mm-hmm.
You are here among us. You're with Ed. May your words and your thoughts and your passion for the lost fill this space, fill our hearts, fill it. We love you, Lord.
Yes.
Preach, love us more. In your holy name.
Amen. Amen. So this is going to be part report and part message, I think. But I want to say something to you, too. This is my report in some ways, but this is really our report. Because the church is who? Us. And so this report has to do some with me, but it has to do with us. And I want us to kind of own this. The scripture that I chose here to get us started is, how many say, raise your hand if you say Habakkuk. Raise your hand if you say Habakkuk. Okay. I don't know. I've heard it both ways a number of times. And I've heard this verse used several times. Why don't we stand and read this together? Don't sneeze or cough if you do while we're reading. You ready? This vision is for a time. It describes the end and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. It will not be delayed. Amen? You can be seated. I've heard this verse used at a whole bunch of different kind of reporting times, and I think the first one The first time I ever saw it used for anything was Hugh Smith, a long time ago, as our district superintendent here. He started, it had to be, gosh, it had to be back in the 80s, I think. And most of the time that I have heard it used, it is in reference, can you put that back up just for a second, Janelle? Most of the time I've heard it used, it has to do with a report. It has to do with a challenge that you're working toward, a vision or a direction. And the part that I was most intrigued with, and the part that I wanted to relate here is kind of the second half of that. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. I love it that God's word consistently, it's like what we were talking about a moment ago with fear. I don't have to wonder, I know that God doesn't want us to be people who live in fear. I also know that there's a whole lot about God's word that will come true. If it hasn't yet and it was prophesied about, it will come true. And so when we talk about things like vision, I'm going to share some stuff today that I know is going to happen. It's either, and you can say, Ev, how do you know as it relates to Hillside Church? And the thing is that I would say this to you. I can't say that everything I wish to have happen at Hillside Church is going to happen, but I do know that God's kingdom is going to happen. Whether it happens completely the way I envision it here, I can't say that, but God is at work to bring about different things, and if it takes till the day the trumpet sounds, He will make it happen. The things that we read last Sunday, that are recorded in Revelation about the curse being gone, about all tribes. Let me hear you, the folks who come from a tribe somewhere. All tribes, say amen. All tribes and tongues will come together and will praise God together. Amen? So I can't say that everything I would envision for Hillside to have happen will happen, but I do know that God's word, as it is expressed in regard to some of the things that I hope for and I pray for here, those things will happen. The other part of that is that I may not even be the pastor who gets to see everything happen that I've been praying for. And that's okay. We still walk together toward this vision of unity and harmony, and I'm going to talk some about that. It will take place. And that last phrase, it will not be delayed, just simply means it's going to happen in God's time. It's not Ev's time. Or your time. We don't get to choose that. So in the report, though, I shared a few things. Rhonda and I arrived here second Sunday in April. It'll be 8 years ago. 8 years ago. But this is really the first time that I've tried to look back on those 8 years in any kind of all-inclusive way. I mean, I have shared some things in the way of a report or a vision statement or message or something like that incorporated a few things here and there, but I tried to look back this time in an all-inclusive way, and knowing that I'm not going to get everything, but in an all-inclusive way over those 8 years. And I thought it would be fun because we could celebrate together, because the church is who? Us. Some of these things. So this is, like I said, our report. During these past 8 years, we have taken in over 200 new members at Hillside Church. We have baptized over 43 into faith. We have met our yearly budgets every year, totaling somewhere between $800,000 to $900,000 that has gone outside of this church into things like missions, missionary support, education, district and general leadership, pensions and benefits. But I wanted you to hear that because I mean, that is a huge amount of sacrifice that this church body has made over just the time and I said, so every year, the reality is I look back and I think that this is right, Debbie, but this church has paid their budgets for 17 years in a row. And it hasn't always been easy. But in the time that I've been here, somewhere around that $800,000 to $900,000 mark that goes outside because we believe in a mission that is encompassing the entire world and not just what's good for us. We've handed out several hundred Thanksgiving baskets over the last 8 years. I have no idea how many. And probably several hundred in the last 8 years, Christmas presents through Angel Tree. And in the last few years, several hundred pairs of socks. I just delivered 44 more pair Friday. The Care Fund has helped cover household shortcomings for food, utilities, occasional medical bills, and many other needs, covering tens of thousands of dollars through this church. In country and out of country, and even locally, we have invested in at least, I'm trying to think, over the last 8 years, at least 10 to 12 work and witness type projects. And like I said, in country, out of country, and locally. And when we do that, that's not just money that goes to those places, but we sent people to bring a message. Speaking of the local work projects, most of you know this, but if you're not fully aware, we have partnered for the last 3+ years, I think it's been, with World Relief. And our cheerleader in that partnership has been Tamina Martelli. She's not here today, but we can clap for her. Tell her we clapped for her. And in those different partnering relationships, I wanted to share some things with you today. We started off, the very first one was the Hillside Parking Plots Community Garden, which took me like a year just to learn how to say. And we have a video of that I found, because some of you aren't even aware, but this is out there on YouTube. And so if we can show that right now.
Motion in my
So this is the third planting season for that garden. Can you believe it? And I had to shift my plot, but very soon will be the Great Zucchini Giveaway. From plot number 22 this year, which is just down the row from Bertrand. Is Bertrand here today? I didn't see him come through. But regular attender from at our church, Bertrand Latte from Cameroon. And every spot, every plot is filled with someone and representing, I believe what I got from Tamina just this last week is 25 different countries. This is us in partnership with World Relief, but they're us and we're them. And it's a wonderful thing. I just encourage you, if you haven't gone down there and walked around, especially when it's growing season, it's amazing. Chase the rabbits out of the way. But it's an amazing thing to be down there and have a chat. I saw Pauda and Durba, who are two friends. I can't remember for sure which country they're from. Do you remember off the top of your head, Grantley? But that I've met. They come to the church property often during the growing season, and get a chance to talk with them. And I see them at Fred Meyer sometimes up on the hill. But bunches of people. Additionally, in that partnership with World Relief, we have also had multiple sowing cohorts. In fact, there's one going on right now downstairs in just off of the fresh ground area. Some of you are familiar with that, but we've got a couple pictures here for that too, I think, just showing. If you're not familiar, it's in the far corner space downstairs. Is it coming here? Well, I know that we have two pictures of that. There we go. And from how many, Deborah, how many different countries have had people represented in that sewing? Can you even guess? Mostly Afghanistan women. It's all, in fact, all of the folks who have participated have been ladies. Mostly Afghanistan. Got another picture, I think, there. Yeah. And then recently, and some of you are aware of this, in our, which magazine was it? I've forgotten now. It's not Holiness Today. Do you remember? Is it just Nazarene Missions Magazine? Nazarene Missions Magazine put out an article on the garden and the sewing cohort that we have going on. And so I have a copy of this in the office sitting there, but that's what the front page of it looked like. It's a big article. And on the inside, it had a picture of the volunteer staff that has been working in that capacity there. Do we have that one? There we go. From left to right, I'm just going to say the lady on the far right, we all know. That's Deborah Velker, our missions president. Why don't we encourage her, by the way, for... And I know the lady in the middle, Sandy, she's been kind of the leader and teacher for quite a while now. But multiple cohorts on that. Additionally, we also have, and I don't have pictures of this, but we have a English as a second language program that is run. It was something that they came to me to ask about, and I went to Pastor Gabriel for El Poderoso's group, and I asked him if they might be interested. And so it's a mom and me, or mommy and me class that happens weekly downstairs too, again in partnership with World Relief. The thing that we're focused on right now is, some of you, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but some of you may not be aware, is the transition for our kitchen, our current main kitchen up here, into a teaching kitchen, a brand new teaching kitchen. And I know that there's some grant money that's already been made available, but there's a ways to go with that until we get there. But it is going to completely change that whole kitchen and turn it into not just a thing that we can use or that the daycare can use, but into something that can actually be used as a teaching kitchen to help people know how to cook food. And so when this comes, we'll as it gets closer and closer, we'll give you more information. but pray about that one. The kitchen, that also reminds me that we have distributed roughly, well, in fact, over 2,000 slices of bacon during 5 different services. On purpose, on Father's Day. And that doesn't even count the special breakfasts, where there was far more bacon served. Take a look at a few of the things that we have built or remodeled in the last 8 years. We completely remodeled with Jordan's kind of direction. We completely remodeled the downstairs children's department. We have an inclusive kind of new logo and sign. By the way, the reason that the children are in here with us today is Janet had to go home. She wasn't feeling well. She had, as you know, she had some blood pressure issues through the pregnancy, and she just got feeling really bad, and so she had to go home, and so we quick transitioned some things, but I'm glad the kids are in here with us. That never bothers me. We also remodeled our foyer. Some of you might remember, I do, what it looked like before we came. It did not look like that, or it also didn't look like that. We also remodeled the Cafe Fellowship area, which didn't look like that. Hang on just a second. It didn't look like that. We completely remodeled this platform. Up until just a few months ago, this didn't look like this, if you remember. Then we also remodeled an area that's now called the Art Barn, which was that next slide you saw there, which is in the opposite corner of that space downstairs, and the ladies meet there. And I've even had other meetings with mixed gender groups for different activities in there, but it is a fun space to go into. How many have been in that space? Yeah. And then we went downstairs, not just those rooms around the outside, but we remodeled the entire fresh ground area downstairs. And here's a handful of pictures to see what that looks like now. And I have to say, even though she's not here and I wish she was, there's one thing that's been in common with the remodel of all of those spaces, and that has been my wife. It's been, yeah. Her creativity and also her willingness to go online and buy things through all kinds of different ways to save money. And I'm not exaggerating. In all of these projects, we've saved tens of thousands of dollars because she's taken the time to do that. And I hate it that she's not here and didn't get a chance to hear you say that to her there. So those are some of the remodel projects, and I know I'm leaving some things out here, but I wanted to walk through this. That doesn't even deal with some of the aging property issues that we've had to work through in the last 8 years, because they have been many. We made a huge commitment to asphalting as much as we could and felt like we'd be good stewards of the money that we had. And so if you drive around the property now, you'll notice that there's some shades of black on there, because some of it is fresh asphalt, some of it has just been recovered, and some of it honestly is going to need some help soon. But it costs a lot of money to do that. We also replaced the main backflow valve. That one thing that was up here in between the first and second parking lot was, I think, $13,000 to replace something about this long that needed to be taken care of. We put in fencing down in the lower lot for the transportation because of the issues that we had there with people stealing the gas out of the vans. And so we went ahead and fenced them in, and still have had issues with that from time to time, but it's a lot better. I think that was over 10 grand too. We had to do some catch up on some of our plumbing issues, just because we had some backup stuff downstairs with our toilets, and that was like, I think, 8 grand, because the stuff had been in place so long that the roots of trees had grown through. So we had to bring in some people and take care of that. Poor Patrick's not here because he's I'm not sure, but he's the one that's been involved with a whole lot of those projects too. Some of you have been here long enough. We took out all the old cherry blossom trees, which was kind of sad, but they were looking kind of gnarly, and all of the shrubs and everything that is in those 2 islands, and even some stuff along the front of the church, all of that was replaced after we came. Lighting around the perimeter. We still have some needs on that too, but lighting around the perimeter of the church, and also in some of the parking areas we've replaced. None of that's been cheap. And that doesn't even mention some of the effort, the financial support that we've given to the sound. Just this technology that we see up here. We've had to change all of our microphones, all the wireless stuff, because of some government changes that happened. I think that was like $6,000 right there. And that doesn't even touch the overhaul of the piano, right, Paul? I mean, that was a chunk of money. All these things, which I have no idea what they do. But those are all new. We have a new set of drums. Sequencing devices, in-ear monitors. And then just in this room for video help. We bought new screens, new projectors, new cameras. If you don't know right now, we also got a new website a while back. And on that website now, thanks to some people who have worked very hard, you can give electronically, because we weren't able to do that even just like a year or two ago. And so there's all kind of ways for you to do that now. And our sermons, and even I went on there just to check out and make sure this last week, not just the sermon, but now there's typically a little bit of music that kind of shows our worship team on there. So you can go online and not just hear, but see the messages. None of that was in place. All of these updates, as near as I could figure, and kind of working through some stuff with our treasurer, all of those updates have totaled, over these last 8 years, nearly $600,000. And additionally, during these 8 years, we have paid down our indebtedness on this property and facility from over $1 million to a shade over $450,000. You know what's fun is to see people clap. This is a non-political statement. It was just interesting to watch a while back when there was a gathering of a report, and how hard it was for folks to figure out whether to clap or whether to stand at the correct time. I'm so glad that you guys aren't worried about that today. These are things that I'm excited about. So I mean, you total all that stuff up, and in addition to paying all of those things that I mentioned that go out of this church, we have committed over these 8 years to paying over $1 million in facility remodel and taking care of things that were kind of left to the side that had to be done, and paying down debt all at the same time. Yes, this is huge, folks. We sold a Covington property, some of you know, and that helped pay. But the biggest things that have gone to pay that debt down and to take care of these remodels have come out of two funds: your regular tithes and offerings, and Get Ready for Company fund, which again is just sacrificial giving. Who is the church? Us. I need to say, kind of alongside that, thank you to our maintenance team, who's also saved us a ton of finances. Yes. A few people who have worked diligently every week to come and paint and remodel or fix or whatever. And we're not done. We still have a ways to go. And the truth is, as a congregation, our number is smaller than what would be necessary to take care and maintain a property like this. But I appreciate your sacrifice. And not for me, but for God's work here, for us to catch up with what needed to be caught up with. We have also hosted Global Leadership Summit the last 5 years. And if you haven't come to that, I just invite you. It's a terrific time. People from churches all around the area, and the attendance on that has increased every year to where we were over 100, I think 115 or something this last year. And that'll happen again in August, and you're invited to come to that. It's a terrific time. We open doors to the Stars of Abraham Learning Center. And there is their logo right there, or that's on their Facebook page at least. And I appreciate all those folks. Linda, who was up here with some of her staff a few weeks ago, because they were given an award showing that they had got past level 3, isn't that right? Or to level 3, and which is a big step, and it comes alongside a support from the state, and we were happy and proud for them. We've hosted wonderful Easter and Christmas services. We've had old friends come to visit. This first picture is an old friend of yours, but I got to know him before he came back here. You remember that guy. Who is that? Dennis Johnson, who was the pastor here when a lot of the stuff that was constructed here happened. I knew him better from a different setting. I think we have that picture. That is Dennis Johnson, and you can see Jamie over to the left on that pillar, but Dennis right in the middle, and that's me to his left, and Rhonda next to me, and that is in the Sweet Surrender Coffee House and Ministry Center in Krakow, Poland. And he and his wife went there and for 6 months helped us start the church that's there now, that is also an international church. That's people from all kinds of different countries. And by the way, for those of you who know, that is like a stone's throw from Schindler's Factory, from the movie Schindler's List. We went skating on ice and at a roller rink. A couple, 3 times, I think, or more than that, at the roller rink, and at least a couple, 3 times. We had to postpone the ice skating. We've had picnics at all kinds of locations, which reminds me that we have distributed over 2,000 pieces of bacon. Over 2,000. You can quote me on that. We have hosted concerts with the NNU Crusader Choir or their orchestra. We also have had a lady come several times. Some of you know her. With her choir, be in prayer for her. She's retired now, and haven't had a chance to talk to Pat for a while. But be in prayer for her. I'm sure she does not like to be retired. We also did a family camp, and that was the logo we used for that. You remember? We come from all kind of different cultures and life experience. We had a friend who came that helped us, I think, a lot. You remember that guy? Bob Stromberg. And that was a terrific time. I've left out loads and loads of events, from children's camps to youth camps, women's retreats, men's conferences and men's retreats, heritage services, encore outings, which, by the way, I was asked the trip to Mohi is postponed for now because of some of the things we've been concerned about, but they'll pick that up. And many, many, many small group studies that we have done at the church. We have worked together, prayed together, grieved together, laughed together, said goodbye together, said hello and welcome together. It has been, and I said this, I think, a couple services ago, a phrase that, I don't know, maybe I heard it somewhere before, but I'm going to hang on to it like it's mine. It's been a beautifully difficult time. And I want to tell you why it's been a beautifully difficult time. I know it's been that way for me, but I think it's also been that way for you at different points. Last year, when most of our staff, in fact, went to the Wesley Conference last January, not just this one previous, but the one before that, one of the featured speakers there, and I believe I've shared this too, his name is Mark DeMaz. He pastors the Mosaic Church in Arkansas, Little Rock. And he's kind of a national authority now on creating something as a truly international mixed congregation. Because that's what he's been working on, and he has degrees to back what he's doing. But what he said at that gathering, or one of the things I remember that he said was, he said, if you're going to transition from a monocultural church into a truly interconnected, international church, it's going to take you 7 to 10 years just to get to stability. If I'd have known that, I'd have still done that. And then he said it'll take another 7 to 10 years to move from stability to sustainability because of the weariness that's involved with that. Now, in the report I gave you, there are 5 things, and I'm going to touch on these pretty quickly, but there are 5 things that are listed that I've kind of written down as I've been traveling through this as these steps that I have perceived as we have been walking together. And the first one, in regard to this transition, I have not read, honestly, Mark Demas's book, but this is from here. This is my own trying to understand and see what we're doing. The first thing that you have to do is seek an understanding of the direction and growth in the community. If you want to transition to something that is representative of an international community, you need to seek an understanding of the direction and the growth in that community. It's the word that we use a lot of times in mission is exegete your community. It just means to do the research, to find out what is really going on there. It's the same word we use when somebody is going to do an expositional message in Scripture. You exegete the passage. You try to figure out, why is this here? And why are they saying what they're saying here? So Jerry Kester wrote to us when we were living in Poland, and he said, we want you to come to Kent because I need a missionary there. And I was like, why? There's only white folk in Kent. That's what I remembered growing up in Enumclaw. And he told me that there had been a discussion with the church board at one point here to sell this property and move to Covington, and that didn't happen, that the congregation voted no. And so, like I said, he said, we need a missionary. So one of the first things Rhonda and I did when we came here is we went to a town hall meeting up at East Hill Elementary, where there were a group of educators, policemen, pastors, and some other government leaders around the area that were gathered in a room up there at East Hill Elementary. And then some folks kind of presented what was going on in the community. And I remember that was the first time I heard someone say this, that as of this day, now this was 8 years ago, but as of today, 8 years ago, 1/3 of the population of East Hill was not born in this country. 8 years ago. And I went, wow, we do need a missionary here. And so we sat down as we came, Rhonda and I, to interview with Jerry there and the church board, and we talked about, is this what we want? Is this what we want to do? And to a person in that church board gathering, they said, yes, this is what we want. And that's the next step in this outline here. It says we have to agree as a church body to a vision for that community. We have to agree. Now, I went and I picked up something the other day. What do you call this? Rubik's Cube. And notice how pretty all of this is right now. This is how it comes in the box. 6 sides, green, red, blue, yellow, orange, and white. And it's all very uniform. It's all very precise. I like this one better. And I took that one that was like that when it came out of the box, and I messed it around until I could get as few of the same colors on one side as any. Now, I know Charlie can take this and fix it for me, because he showed me that up at their cabin the other day. I don't want to fix it. I like it as it is. The thing has been for us. And so when you think of us as a church now, see, here's the deal too, is this can be a multiple culture church where all this culture is together all the time, and all this culture is together all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to argue missiology with people who feel like that fits. So you could have a church. We've tried to figure this out at different times, but I think we vacillate maybe between 20 and 30. I'm not sure how many different countries, but at least 20 or 30 different countries represented in this service, typically. We could go to this with all of those people. But I like this better. And it's not just a word like. I love this better. And I hope you do too, because the thing is that this is, we've been here 8 years. As long as we're here, that's what it's going to be like. And I don't mean that as a threat. I mean that as a hope. So what began with the board in that dialogue encouraged us to stay. And one of the things, though, that this means for all of us, what this means for all of us, not just me, is it means that I agree to, I choose to, I take into my own heart this idea. I choose not for me, but for we. Not for me, but for us. Which means, like that story I read last week from Reuben Welch's book, We Really Do Need Each Other. That means that some of us who are used to charging this direction and getting out in front in all kinds of things are going to have to say, you know what, it's not important for me to be first. Remember the story? And step back and help somebody along who isn't getting it. Instead, what happens a lot of times is we notice somebody is having a struggle with something, and I'm just going to be honest with you. What happens is somebody calls me and says, would you go talk to them? I want to say to you, no, you talk to them. Because this isn't just my thing. This is our thing. And so whether it's what happens up here in music or what happens in the development of activities, it's what we have to decide. This is not for me, this is for we. This is not just for me, this is for us. And it looks like this, and it's gonna be hard. But I'm okay with that. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 6. You don't have these verses, but I do. As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling that you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another. Did you know that there are over 100 one another's in the New Testament? Which remind us that this is what is needing to happen. Bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body, one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope. Just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, through all, and in all. How many? How many? One. For all of us. John 17:11. I will remain in the world no longer. This is Jesus' words as he's preparing the disciples for his departure. He says, I will be in the world no longer, but they are still in the world, and I am coming to you. Holy Father, protect them by the power of your name, the name that you gave me, so that they may be one, even as we are one. There will be a tension. Good grief, it's not like that's new to the church. Do we sing enough hymns? Do we sing enough choruses? Do we have enough Bible reading? Is there no drama? And I mean it in the written sense. I didn't realize that'd be funny till right when I said it. There will be tension because everything in your flesh and in my flesh wants to make us comfortable. If you can find somewhere in God's word where it says, We are going to be comfortable. You come tell me because I've not found it. It's uncomfortable to carry a cross. So the third step in your outline is this, and forgive me, we're probably going to go over a little bit, but the third step is to create space at the leadership table and in the worship circle for that community. So we started off with, we're identifying what the community looks like. We have agreed as a church body to a vision for that community, and now we're creating space at the leadership table as well as the worship circle, this being our worship circle. So we're trying to do things in those two capacities for the community to have a chair. I was going to take some time here for a moment, but I won't in light of where we're at. But I wanted to recognize our board. If this is the most diverse board. The boards that I've worked with the last several years here have been the most diverse, either men, women, different countries represented, ages that I've ever worked with. And I'm happy about that. The same with our staff. During the last month, in fact, as a representation of this idea, of this vision, you probably know this because we've said some things, but in the last month, first it was Andre and I that went over, it was January, I think, 27th. Pastor Andre Sims from Christ the King Bible Fellowship, who many of you have met before, a good friend of mine. We went over to share at a chapel service we had been invited to come to as an outgrowth kind of that Wesleyan conference. And then our youth worship team was invited to come and also share. I think we have a video of that, but they shared in the chapel service. There was Pastor Russell and Amy and Paul and Joan, and I think 4 or 5 of our students that were there, some that were at NNU and some that came with them. And so they had the privilege to share musically in chapel. And then also again, because it was Winter Awakening, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they also led the music. And I have a clip of that right here just to show you. And then just this last Wednesday, Tamina Martelli also shared in chapel. We're not that big of a group, folks. But our college asked 3 times for representatives from this church, from Hillside Church, to share with the college students. And the reason, and I want to say this with all humility, but also with a sense of celebration, you are leading the way in this right now for our denomination. Number 4 in that process here is choose relationship and not just representation with those at the table and in the circle. What that suggests is it's possible for us to stand next to one another but not really know each other. It's possible for us to say in my head, I accept this person as my brother or my sister, but not yet in my heart do I know them. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Building community is hard, period. Building community like what we're talking about is even doubly hard. I wanted to read something here to you from an article written by Eugene Park, who is the associate pastor at True North Church in Palo Alto. He says we treat community like a stop at Chipotle. You can curate your community just like your burrito, down to your exact preference. In turn, our nation and churches have become more polarized and tribal than ever. Turning community into a consumer commodity has led to what the New York Times columnist David Brooks has dubbed the golden age of bailing. If community is found, it's just as easily left. I know of a pastor who was guest speaking at another church's retreat and was surprised to see in the audience someone who had just gone through the membership class at his own church. I've seen in my pastoral ministry how quickly people bail at the first disappointment or disagreement. He says when we try to find a church community, we only treat the church as a consumer. We avoid the depth needed to truly transform and sustain our souls. We need to stop thinking like shoppers and more like builders. How do we go about building rather than looking for community? Number one, he says, don't be an architect. Excuse me, Durwood. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, those who love their dream of a Christian community, more than they love the Christian community itself, become destroyers of the Christian community. Many of us choose to be architects rather than builders of a community, dreaming up an ideal church rather than committing to a real church. The more we clutch our own blueprints rather than embrace the people of God as placed in front of us, the more grief we will bring to ourselves and to them. Number two, building requires friction, not comfort. Consumer approaches to finding community naturally favor the easiest and smoothest route. If community is something you choose, naturally you choose one that'll make your life simpler, not more complex. It's only through effort, sweat, and tears that anything worthy is built, community included. The New Testament epistles are filled with imperatives to care, love, and forgive one another. Any genuine and lasting community will have to work through conflict. The last one there in your outline is this: to live out the new normal as it relates to our community-based church family. Community here means, we've recited this several times, but it's not just Kent. I'm going to need another 10 minutes. Is that okay? It's not just Kent. It's Kent and Covington and Renton and across the valley. I live in Des Moines. It's Auburn. We have people who come from all of these different areas. So community for us is a decision here to build together in the name of what Christ has shared with us is his kingdom culture. And we all contribute. From those who contribute a little toward the paying off of that indebtedness. One of the things I'm most happy about and most in anticipation of too at Faith Promise is there's people who pledge a significant amount as far as like the total to that Faith Promise pledge, but there's others who pledge an equally significant amount as it relates to what their income is. And that's been going on a long time. Goes all the way back to the widow's mite. It also means that the new normal for us is not only do we all contribute, and I'm speaking to our international folks who are, and I'm using a term that for me, I was trying to figure out something a few years ago now that would reference people who were not born out of this country. But as we talked about in class this morning, international is all of us. But those who have come here primarily, let's say, through immigration, as refugees, as asylees, or just came to us with another ethnicity within the United States than what was primarily the ethnicity in this church, which was Anglo. We all contribute and we are all involved in reconciling. And the reconciling concept comes from 2 Corinthians 5, 16 and 20, and I'm not going to recite that because I did that at least, I think, maybe last week or the week before. But just as Christ, or God through Christ, reconciled humanity to him, we are called to be reconcilers. Our brothers and our sisters are everywhere. Some of them don't even know that they're our brothers and sisters yet. We have to do the work to help them understand that. So I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick here. As we look ahead within that new normal that is this, and we say we know it's going to be hard, but we're going to do it anyway because it makes sense biblically. As we look ahead to that, there's some things that we will continue to do. And I just encourage you to look in the website for some of the stuff that's there in respect to vision and mission. But there's a couple things that I thought I would highlight here really quick. In this beautifully difficult journey. Our website mentions two things. Callaloo and curbside. Curbside is, does that look like something you did at some point? Anybody here? Just me? I guess just me. Sitting down with a couple other buddies and talking about important things like if Superman is stronger than Batman. No, but other things. Sometimes what it's like at your home. Maybe not so deep all the time, but curbside conversations is the idea that we would come together, that we would by choice become a group of people who are trying to find opportunities to dialogue about important things in our lives, not just surface stuff, within almost everything we do as a church body. Some things may be less focused on that, but at least this is what we're trying to get to in order that we can become one family that looks like this. The other idea that is listed there on the website is the idea of Callaloo. And that was the image I found. I don't know how well that looks like it, but that was the one I found a while back. But Callaloo, in fact, lots and lots of cultures have this idea of Callaloo. But as I understand it, it's basically an idea that you use what is here, the best to your ability. You incorporate different things, all kinds of different things. There isn't necessarily one recipe for Callaloo, right? And so it has to do with the idea, it goes back to what we started with, exegeting your community and going, this is who we are. So let's bring the very best of everything that is who we are into this, and it will sustain us, it will keep us going. So Callaloo and curbside, remember those two things. Every Wednesday, right now, there is a program going on that has done exactly this, and I wanted to show you a handful of pictures. Last Wednesday, I think Dell just left a few minutes ago, so he didn't get to see this picture of him. But last Wednesday we did a practice that we actually did 2 Wednesdays before that, and we interviewed each other just for the purposes of getting to know each other and to kind of understand each other a little bit more. So here's another picture, and another, and another, and another. I think we have 1 or 2 more. And that was just a fraction of those that were there. But what you see in there is this. And Callaloo and curbside all at the same time. We're asking questions of each other. We took 20, 25 minutes, I think, for this. And we're asking questions, really, some of them are important, but some of them are just like, if you had the chance to go to Alaska or Hawaii, which one would you choose and why? Down to, when God is trying to speak to you, how does he usually do it? We're crossing generational lines and we're crossing cultural lines to learn each other's name. One of the practices too, so each person, they interview each other, and then one person stands up and they introduce themselves. Hi, my name is Ev, and there we go. It's like you're at an AA meeting. Hi, my name is Ev. And I interviewed Matthias. Man, it sounds so goofy, but it's doing this for us. It's growing us. So one of the last pictures that I wanted to show you here, and then one story, and I'll wrap up. So I promised you 10 minutes, so I got 3 left. So this is posted. This is something my wife did a while back. It's downstairs on one of the walls in the Cafe Fellowship kind of large meeting area. If you go out to the garden this summer, you'll see people whose faces are pretty close. I mean, she used the colors she had. Belong, believe, become. So there's this story that Bob Benson tells. Go ahead, we'll finish with a song. Can you come up and actually, if Paul would just, I don't think we're going to have time for a song. If Paul would just come up to play piano for us, because we're going to close with prayer. Bob Benson tells this story of how he comes to a church one time, and he's invited to go to a church picnic that's going on after the church service, and he's totally unprepared. He didn't know that they were having this picnic because he wasn't a part of the church, but he showed up for the very first time. We have some people here today for the very first time. In spite of the daylight savings and in spite of the health concerns, you're here for the first time. Welcome. He says, I showed up and they announced they were having this church picnic. And so he wanted to go because everybody was so friendly. And so he decided that he was going to come with them. They said where it was going to be, and he got the map, the details on how to get there. And so he raced home and looked in the refrigerator, and there was nothing there that he could contribute to the church picnic. Except for, the story he tells says, except for like one kind of on the edge piece of bologna, a slice of cheese, and some good Wonder Bread. And then he reached in and there was the mayonnaise and the mustard, and there was just enough in there that you got it all over your knuckles when you were getting the knife to kind of scrape it out. Applied that to the sides of that Wonder Bread, slapped it together, put it in a bag, and headed for the church picnic. And got there, and there was this banquet laid out. Pies. And fried chicken, and roast beef, and chapatis, sukuma wiki, ugali, mandazi, chai tea, and all kinds of, and corn on the cob, and brisket. I'm ready to go eat lunch. But it was all laid out there in this amazing, amazing banquet. And this guy, let's pretend he's you or me, shows up and he's got that bologna sandwich. And is kind of intimidated by this banquet. And starts to back up and go, I can't do that. And this one dear lady saw me and said, hey, I saw you at church today. What do you got? And you were like, wanted to run back to your car, you know. And you kind of stepped forward, or I stepped forward, opened it up, and she pulled out that bologna sandwich and said, hey, you know what? I love bologna sandwiches. Is it okay if I just put that here with the rest of our stuff and we all just share? Bob Benson writes, it's at that moment that you realized that you came to the picnic as a pauper, but you're going to eat like a king. That's what I dream.